Hello, I'm Rory Jones and welcome to the glorious River Wye, just outside Hereford. We've come today to look at catching barbel on a really simple setup. A one rod, straight lead and pellet. It's late summer and we're going to look at how we approach a river that's been fished a lot and to really maximise your chances of catching these big fish. Let's cast out and see if we can get one. So the first thing to discuss is swim selection. Now when you're targeting barbel on rivers like the Wye, although there are lots of them, it's important to pick your peg when you have the opportunity of pleasure fishing like we do today. Now what I've looked for is oxygenated water. Because that's where the barbel generally like to live. There's a bite, first cast of the day. Now the oxygenated water that I've got in front of me here comes down from a bend upstream of me and then pushes to the far bank. You can see by my box setup that I'm around about 3 metres off the bank. So it's like a small barbel. Seems to be lots of these in the river at the moment, which is a really good sign. Oh, look at that. Glorious small barbel. Might not be £10, but fish really don't get much more beautiful than that. Maybe a pound in weight. Absolutely fin perfect. A nice little whiskers there. Use those for sort of feeling for the food on the bottom, and then he's perfectly hooked in the top lip. Couldn't resist that pellet. Just pop him back, make sure he's got enough energy. After being rudely interrupted by that barbel, let's get back to swim selection. So as I say, the water pushes down from the bridge above us and moves over to the far bank. On the inside here, it's very, very shallow. See, I'm sat out probably 3 to 4 metres into the water, and all the pace and current and depth is pushing along that far bank. Where I'm sat here, it's probably about a foot or so deep. On the far bank where I'm fishing, it's 6 to 8 feet deep. And there's a line of bubbles moving along this far bank in this gully, in this deeper gully. And that line of bubbles shows me that that's where the pace is, and that's also where the natural food is pushing. Now barbel, like any fish, like to make life easy. So they're looking for depth and flow. The depth gives them the security, and the flow brings their natural food to them and also allows them to get out of the way of any predators, otters or anything like that came into the river to try and get hold of them. So that's the area of the river that I'm looking to try and target. In front of me here I've also got a couple of overhanging trees that these bubbles are just sort of kissing the edge of the trees. So what that allows me to do is to fish initially upstream and work my way down towards the tree. I feel as the day goes on, it's a bright August day, that the fish are probably going to back off into the trees where there's a little bit more shade and a little bit more shelter and security for them. So this is the perfect sort of summer peg for me. It's got the depth, it's got pace, it's got the natural food that will be coming through this gully, and it really is the perfect swim to try and target barbel and an odd big chub during the summer months. One of the most important things when you're tackling a big wild water like the Wye is your setup. And today I'm using my ock box. I'm sat out in the water, and ordinarily I would need a platform, but today I'm sat in around a foot to a foot and a half of water, and I've decided to use the outrigger system. That gives me the security and the stability when I'm sat out in the water. The box is absolutely rock solid. You can see there's absolutely no movement. I've got the feeder arm off the front leg, up in the air, keeping the line nicely out of the water, so I've paid the bow in, and I'm not dragging additional lead through the swim. I've then got my side tray on the left hand side with no supporting legs. which is perfect. It's nice and easy, it just sits straight on the legs there, it's lovely and stable. It really is a great setup for when you're trying to target waters like the Wye or any natural water in the UK where the banks are a little bit uneasy or you have to get out in the water and stability is key. Now let's just have a little look at the setup that we're using today on the River Wye. Now, lots of people get deterred from fishing rivers like the Wye because they think that specialist equipment's needed. However, in the summer months, with the river at the height it is now, the kit that I'm using is generally in most anglers' tackle rooms. The rod I've got here is 13 foot. It's a medium heavy rod, but a 12-foot rod will be no problem at all. This one is the Sphere medium heavy. There's a 2-ounce tip in there. Most people will have a 2-ounce tip or a 1-ounce tip, say for method feeder fishing on a commercial. A rod of that type would be absolutely fine. I've then got a reel loaded with an 8-pound mainline. And now, perhaps most importantly for me, when I'm targeting barbel on a river like the Wye, is the actual setup here. So today we're using a straight lead. Now, the way I've set this up is on a twizzled boom with the lead between 2 line stops. There's a gap between the line stops of around about ½ an inch. Now what that does is it effectively creates what many would consider to be an old-fashioned bolt rig, which nowadays aren't looked on very favourably for people that are targeting fish such as barbel, because the fish may get tethered up if it snaps the line. However, the way this is set up with these running line stops means that if the barbel were to snap the main line above this setup and the lead was snagged, the barbel could actually pull, as I am there, the lead against the line and move that line stop, effectively freeing itself from the snag. But the line stop offers enough resistance that on the bite, the lead hits that top stop and it drives the hook home. And that's what gives you those beautiful drop back bites. They're virtually unmissable when you're targeting barbel. And then below that, I've got my hook length, which is around about 3 foot in this instance. It's 0.19, and this then comes down to a size 12 barbed-eyed animal hook, and then a simple pellet band arrangement. One other little tip with this sort of setup: we're banding quite big pellets today. Anything from 6 to 12 mil. We'll vary the pellets as the day goes on. Sometimes you get more bites on 6 mils, but through the day it may change. What I've actually done here, although I'm only using 1 band, I've actually put 2 bands in the loop. Now, to anybody that likes their equipment to be absolutely perfect and they worry about the presentation, I have absolutely no issue with there being a spare band on the same loop as the band that I'm using for the pellet. But what that allows me to do, if that bottom band that's currently on the pellet breaks, there's still a band on the loop ready to go and affix another pellet to. There's also another added bonus. Barbel are cagey fish. Sometimes they're in the peg and you'll get little plinks on the tip. They're moving around eating the pellets that I've been firing in, grazing on the gravel looking for the pellets. But they're aware that there's something wrong with yours. And sometimes what I'll actually do is band 2 pellets on the same hair. 2 6mm pellets kick off at different angles and sit a little bit unusually on the bottom. And quite often it'll get you an extra few bites on days where everybody's gone a little bit quiet, say the middle of the day, the fishing's difficult. Having 2 pellets on that just look a little bit more unusual on the bottom will get you an extra bite or 2. That's one of my biggest tips when targeting barbel on rivers like the Wye. Give it a go and you'll definitely catch a few more. So at the start of the session, as I've mentioned here, I've got this gully running from left to right. I'm loose feeding pellets into the top of the gully, but also some in front of me. What I'm looking to do is bring the barbel from lower down the gully up in front of me. I'll start by fishing almost directly in front of me and gradually work my way with the lead down the peg until I've found where the barbel are held up. So let's just cast out and have a look at paying the bow. So I've just cast out into the gully there, felt the lead hit the bottom, and then I'm paying 8 pulls off the reel up to the first eye. That's how I'll count the bow, and then putting the rod down onto the rest. What that bow enables me to do is to actually hold bottom with less lead. If I have a direct tension to the lead, I'd probably need at least ½ an ounce more because of the pressure that's building through the line directly to the lead. Paying the bow also enables me to see those lovely drop back bites. Rather than the rod arching forward and the barbel potentially breaking you on the bite, the bow gives that separation, so the rod will fall backwards, indicating a bite. You'll pick up, and sometimes you'll actually feel like you've missed the bite. You'll get 2 or 3 turns onto the reel handle, and then you're into the fish. It buys you that extra little bit of security rather than fishing directly to the lead. One of the benefits of fishing the straight lead, I caught a barbel almost dead in front of me at the start of the session. And I don't really feel like that's the right place to be fishing now. I feel like the fish are perhaps slightly lower down the peg. So, unlike with a feeder, where you've been introducing bait and looking to build a swim in one particular area, there's no control with a straight lead in that I can reel in, and if I fancy a cast a little bit lower down the peg, I can almost metre by metre work my way down to where I feel the fish are lying. And you will find with barbel that sometimes they'll actually be somewhere that you don't expect, and that by moving down in sort of metre sections, you'll locate a shoal of fish. Sometimes that shoal of fish may only be 2 or 3 fish, but it might be a much bigger shoal, and you may end up with a really good little period of fishing in a certain area of the peg. Now, that's something I've found particularly in summer conditions where the fish tend to hold up quite tightly. In the winter, when there's more colour in the water and the river's bigger and it's flowing harder, you can fish the feeder down one hole and really look to build a peg as the day goes on. That doesn't tend to happen so much in the summer, and it's why the lead is so good, because I can trickle these pellets into the top of the peg here. I'm loose feeding a 6mm halibut pellet, and on the band at the moment I've got an 8mm pellet with a little bit of a pellet oil on it, a sort of oily, hempy sort of scent coming off the pellet just to give it that little bit more pulling power. And what I can then do is just drop the lead down the peg over this loose feed that's been going in, and you may find that the loose feed's either settling in a certain area of the peg or that the barbel just simply don't want to move, like that one there. That's the first cast, just slightly lower down the peg. Ooh, now he's actually run straight into a snag there. Now, this doesn't always work, but a little tip when you're fishing for big river fish, if they snag you up, is not to just keep pulling, because all that will do is send the fish further into the snag and you've got more chance of being snapped. Instead, what I like to do is just open the bail arm and just pay line out. Just as I'm doing here, just letting that line go down the swim, no tension in the tip. Now what I'm trying to do is actually make that fish think that it's free, that it's won the fight, and hope that it swims out of the snag. Barbel, unlike chub, don't tend to really snag you as hard as a chub does. Often when a chub snags you, it's game over. I think I've paid enough line out there. Let's just tension back up and see if we've managed to get it out of the snag. Doesn't always work, but there's always a chance. Just bringing that line back up now, see if the fish has swum out. We've managed to get that barbel out of the snag. It took a little bit of time, slowly releasing that pressure and letting the fish know that it was safe, but eventually, with a little bit of persuasion, we managed to get it to come out. It doesn't always work, but it just shows that sometimes actually doing the opposite of what you may think is right in keeping big pressure on these fish, just opening the bail arm, letting them effectively go, can sometimes work wonders. And we're still attached to this fish. Feels like a reasonable fish, maybe 5 or 6 pounds, good summer fish. Now it's important when you're playing barbel not to let them dictate the fight. Obviously if the fish runs, give it a little bit of line, but you want to keep a high rod. Unlike playing a carp on a commercial where you're generally taught to keep a low rod and pump the fish towards you. What you have to remember with a river is that, as that fish has just found, they're full of snags and gravel, all of which will easily cut the line. Even a heavy line of an 019 or the 8-pound main line that I've got on there can be easily cut. And by keeping a high rod, you're keeping as much of that line as possible out of the water. Now this fish is just coming into netting range here. Now typically of barbel they tend to swim upstream, and what we're looking to do is draw the fish up in the current like this, bringing it to the surface and then lowering it back down towards the net. So here it comes, upstream with me now, which is perfect, on the surface and into the net first time. That's a lovely wide barbel, perhaps slightly bigger than I first thought. In the winter that fish might be 7 or 8 pounds. Nicely hooked there. Beautiful lean Wye barbel. They really are powerful fish. Mainline. There we are. Another barbel. The fish really have just dropped down this gully a little bit. They're obviously interested in the pellets that are going in, but like so often in the summer, these fish have been fished for and they just become a little bit wary, and by moving your bait every 2 or 3 casts, just dropping it a little bit further down the gully, you can stay in contact with these fish that are drifting in and out of the peg. This feels like another of these small barbel. It really doesn't matter how big they are, they're just lovely to catch. Really good fighters. This fish is probably only a pound or so, but it fights like a 10-pound carp. Just draw it up the peg here. There it is. Lovely little Wye barbel. And in the net. It's quite rare to see barbel of this size. There's not many rivers where you catch them so small, but they really are immaculate. Look at the colours. Beautiful little fish. The pellet still hanging out the corner of its mouth. Just pop it back. Lovely. Now let's look a little bit at how we're actually feeding the peg. I'll just reposition the lead and then we'll run through the feeding. Just drop that nicely into the gully over there. Pay the bow out. Back on the rest. Now, all I've got on my side tray is a tub with a few different sized pellets to put in the band, and 1 tub of 6mm pellets and a catapult. Now, I'm feeding in 2 locations. Firstly, at the top of the peg and into the gully, with around about 10 to 15 pellets at a time. Now that's the bait that I think I'm actually fishing over for the majority of the session. And then what I'm also doing is feeding a lesser volume of pellets, sort of 6 or 8 pellets, lower down the peg. And what I think those pellets are doing is getting further down the swim, and any barbel that is sat lower down in this gully will find those pellets and gradually work their way up the swim and then reach the main body of the feed. Now the pellets that I'm feeding the lesser amount of in front of me or slightly downstream, I'm only firing, say, every 5th or 6th cast. I don't want the barbel to sit at the bottom of the peg. I just want them to find a few free offerings there and move their way up to find the main body of the feed that's in the gully in front of me for, say, the first 15 to 20 metres of the peg. So every time I cast out, I'm feeding at the top of the swim with that reasonable handful of pellets, and then every 5th or 6th cast, a lesser amount in front of me or slightly downstream to draw the fish up. Now, one of the important things with lead fishing is that I'm actually not looking at grouping the pellets really tightly. I want these fish to graze over a big area. If they're in too tight an area, every time you catch one, you just spook the whole shoal, and then it becomes more difficult to catch the next fish. What I'm looking to do is spread the pellets over an area of, say, 6 or 8 metres when they land, and then also I want those pellets through the swim for an area of, say, 10 to 20 metres, because that allows me to work either upstream of the bait, fish within the bait, or go below it, and just search for the fish over the session It's all about moving all the time with the lead to just seek those extra few bites. The last 2 fish I've caught have been well below where I caught the fish initially in the peg, and that just shows that they've drifted downstream as I've caught a few. They've obviously got a little bit wary and they don't want to sit in amongst the main body of the bait. You can't do that with the feeder, and that's one of the key strengths of straight lead fishing during the summer months. There we are, there's a last fish to end the session. Not a big fish, but still a lovely Wye barbel. I hope this video has just shown you the importance of adopting a different approach to barbel fishing. So many people just go down the route of using a feeder when fishing for barbel, but there's so many other ways of targeting them, and actually by using a straight lead you often get the best out of what could otherwise be a difficult session. This fish was caught so far down the peg that you would almost think that there could be no loose feed down there, but it just shows that the fish are still willing to feed, but they're perhaps a little bit too cagey to sit up amongst the main body of the feed, but they are still there to be caught. A lovely fish. Let's slip it back, and I hope to see you on the bank soon.